Hi ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to PPTV. Today we're going to compare two earphones in the next installment of our Battle of the Earphone series. That's right, today we're going to talk about the 64 Audio TIA Trio versus the Fur Audio M4. Let's go! So in the left corner we have a 64 Audio TIA Trio. As its name implies, it has three drivers. It leaves nothing to the imagination. But what are these three drivers? The first would be a single high TIA driver, which is basically an open driver. Secondly would be a single balance armature handling the mid-range, and lastly a dynamic driver handling the bass. Inside it though has a special module called the Apex module, which is 64 Audio's variant of the pressure release system, which I think works extremely well. And all that goodness is encased in a black anodized aluminum chassis followed by a warm grey top plate, and has a faceplate that is made of a very nice brushed metal. And all in all, it looks sweet. Also, the Trio comes in a 2-pin termination, which makes cable swapping extremely easy. So let's start with sound. Sound in terms of bass, based on the Trio, it's actually very interesting. So what you get with the sub bass, it's actually very rumbly and it's actually very prominent. I think this is done so simply because the mid bass, where it kicks in, it is actually a bit higher than normal. So what you get is a very nice rumbly sub bass that is vastly separated from the mid range. But that does not mean that mid range is completely not present. It is present too, and in terms of bass, it is actually very full sounding and very complete. I really enjoy the bass quite a bit. So next, moving on to mid range. Mid range in the Trio is a little bit recessed. Some would even call it slightly dark. I find them to be a rather warm affair compared to the M4s, but in terms of detail, they are still really good. You can really hear the nuances. It's just not as in your face as the M4s are. But honestly, if you're looking for details, it is still really present in the mid-range. Vocal sounds extremely well defined and a bit more full body compared to the M4. And lastly, in terms of treble presentation, is rather polite. It still extends really well. All your crashles and sizzles, they are still very present. It's just that when they decay very organically. I think this is simply because of the Apex module working its magic. It does not decay artificially, like, you know, sometimes they just linger on too long and becomes a bit harsh. This is not the case. It is a very smooth with the 64 Audio Trio. And lastly, soundstage of the 64 Audio Trio, to be honest with you, is actually very on point. It is great. In terms of height and width, they are excellent because of the Apex module. The Apex module basically is a pressure relief system that also makes it a semi-open system. In terms of depth and positioning on the Trio, it's also excellent. You can really tell where the instruments are coming from and how deep the instruments are coming from as well. So all in all, I would say soundstage on the Trio is fantastic, especially considering that this is an IEM. And in the right corner, we have the Fur Audio M4. Again, the name kind of gives it away. The Fur Audio M4 has 4 drivers. Let's find out what 4 drivers is inside the Fur Audio M4. You have one direct treble driver which handles all the high frequencies, followed by one balanced armature that also does the highs. Next coming up would be the single mid-range balanced armature driver, and lastly one single tactile bass dynamic driver that handles the bass. So all in all, you get 4 drivers that covers a complete range of sound. Atom is also located inside the Fur Audio M4, and this is Fur Audio's answer to the Apex module. It is also a pressure relief system that really equalizes pressure really well. And all of this is crystallized in a chassis that is made of anodized aluminum as well. It is black in color, but the M4 has a nice gold anodized faceplate, and all in all, very solidly built together. It has a MMCX connector for easy cable swapping, and you can just swap them with any MMCX cable available in the market. Moving on to sound of the M4, let's start with bass. Bass on the M4 is very different from how 64 Audio does it with the single dynamic driver. What Fur Audio has, it's tactile bass. What tactile bass basically means is that it uses the dynamic driver and it uses the whole chassis of the M4 to act as a resonance chamber for bass, and this results in a very organic bass response. It sounds very, very natural. So bass extension is very natural, and there is an organic way of how bass expands. Bass presents itself in a way whereby it's very, very realistic, and honestly, it sounds bigger than what I would think coming from an IEM. Mid-range in the M4 is drastically different from the Trios. It is not warm and lush like the Trios, but rather very clean, precise, and articulate. It comes across as very natural. In fact, I think details come across easier on the M4s compared to the Trios. And that's not to say that Trios have no detail. They do, but it's just that you have to search for them a bit more. It does not sound overly thick, and I think overall it's a very natural representation of how vocal sounds like. And in terms of treble, the M4's treble is very effortless and clean, so you get a lot of sparkle with it. It's single direct treble balanced armature driver, really handles the highs very well. It's not overly shimmery. Sometimes when you get too much treble, you get an overly bright effect and it can be a little bit grating. None of that is on the M4. In fact, I think it's very smooth and very well done. In terms of soundstage, again, it is a pressure relief system that basically makes it a semi-open earphone, so which means that the width and height naturally becomes very excellent. In terms of depth and separation, the M4 also does an excellent job. You can literally tell where the instruments are coming from and how deep the instruments are. But I think it comes across as a bit clearer simply because of the mid-range being less recessed than the Trio. So in terms of positioning, I think it comes across slightly better than the Trio. And finally, in conclusion, between the two, which wins at what? Honestly, the Trio, it's the earphone to get if you like a more relaxed sort of listen. The details are still present, but you have to look for them a little bit more compared to the M4. The M4, on the other hand, is a very neutral, natural monitor where all the details are presented to you very effortlessly. You can pick all the details out by itself. Some might say there's a little bit more is a little bit more energetic compared to the Trio, but honestly between the two it all boils down to preference. There is no true real one answer to dominate one over the other. In fact, I think both of them are excellent for the price. And with that, thank you so much for watching PPTV. I hope you like this Battle of the Earphones series where I compare some earphones against another. And if you like what we are doing so far, kindly like and subscribe. Press the like and subscribe button below and press the bell icon to be notified. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you guys very soon. Bye guys.